My name is John Enderby, and I'm a Vice President of the Society. And within my brief are the physical sciences, that of course includes planetary science, the topic behind this evening's conversation with Colin Pillinger. Now, before we start, may I make the usual announcement and invite you please to turn off your mobile phones and pagers. The event will be webcast live, and hence all the cameras and equipment around the hall. Now, Beagle 2 was one of the great scientific adventures of recent years. And although in the end it failed to reply to our request for information, which sounds familiar actually to anyone who's queried a bill with an electricity supplier, it did spark the imagination of young and old alike. For my money, it was British enterprise at its best. It was professional, it was economic, and enthusiastically carried out through to completion by a devoted team who freely gave of their time and energy, way below the call of duty, and indeed for which they were actually paid. Now, the chair for this event is Ogia, the science correspondent of the Times, and I will now hand over to her to introduce the rest of the panel.
Right. Can everybody hear me? No, excellent. Okay. I just want to give you a brief overview of why we're here. Beagle 2, which was described as variously looking like a portable barbecue or a giant clam, was launched in June last year from Kazakhstan. It separated from its mothership successfully on the 19th of December. Since then, as you all know, the nation has been waiting with bated breath to see if it's going to be heard of. It's not communicated since that time. And today, as some of you will also know, there's been an inquest into what's gone wrong. But we're here to celebrate Beagle 2, and the reason why we're going to do that is that even though Beagle 2 has not had the success that we've hoped it would, I think it has had an effect on the nation. And that can be proved by a Mori poll which was carried out this month, showing that 70% of the public agree that space is exciting, and I don't think we would have had a statistic like that without somebody like Professor Pillinger. And more importantly, I think, than that, is that the Mori poll described the youth of today as the Beagle generation, as opposed to the Apollo generation. And I think that is a real testament to what Colin's done. So, without further ado, I want to open the floor to questions. I think, first of all, I think most of us really want to know what went wrong and why we haven't heard about Beagle. So I'm going to hand over to Colin to describe today's conference.
Well, I think I'm going to stay put sitting here, and I hope you'll come and join us and make it more like a fireside chat than an inquest where you stand in judgment on me. It will make it far more homely. Everybody wants to know the answer to the question about why didn't Beagle 2 call home. There are many, many reasons why it maybe didn't. I can't give you any answers to that possible list of questions. What we actually did today was to combine many of those possibilities together and perhaps group them. The difficulty is that without some actual information from the spacecraft, we cannot know how far it got. It left, as Anjan has already said, on December the 19th, and it was scheduled to call back on 5:30 a.m. on Christmas morning and didn't. There are many, many things which happen in a sequence between those two times. And unless you can picture or find Beagle 2 on the surface and get a photographic camera shot of it, showing you what format it's currently in, then any one of those things could have been the thing that has happened to it. You would love to know the answer, and nobody would want to know the answer more than me, because if it was a question of Beagle getting very, very close to the end point, then we could simply say, we so nearly did it, all we have to do is to rectify the last problem, and we could fly Beagle 2 again almost instantaneously without any further testing. In the absence of that information, then I think we simply have to look at all the things that could have gone wrong and minimize the ones which are the major risks and eliminate any that we can possibly get out of the process. And that's the position we're actually in.
Palab, this is Palab Ghosh, science correspondent of the BBC. Now, you've covered this for a long time. You were also here at the event today. I won't call it an inquest.
I've been at the event today. I was there on Christmas morning. I was there 5 years ago when Colin sort of unfurled this weird, slightly different barbecue set, and was convinced that it would be on the surface of Mars. I was working for regional television at the time, and we thought, what an eccentric story this is. But there we were. I mean, it was an amazing evening, just coming along Christmas morning in Camden, and it was, it was the coolest party in town. There were pop stars, journalists, Colin, and I went up to him and I said, "So, Colin, how do you feel?" He said, through gritted teeth, "Fine, happy as ever." So then said to Judith, his wife, "Colin says he's fine," and Judith said, "Yes." So everyone was fine. But as the evening wore on, there was such a wonderful build-up of expectation. We had a real-time video that Colin played as to what we would have seen if ESA had given Colin a bit more mass and allowed some cameras on board and the transmission equipment to send it back down to Earth. And we hurtled down through the atmosphere, the parachutes opened, the airbags opened, it bounced across the Martian surface, and it had landed, and there was this huge cheer. And we were just waiting for that signal, all of us, particularly the cynical old hacks, who love nothing better than a good knocking story, some conspiracy. For a moment, we just got caught up in the moment. And the whole nation, I mean, because it was on Christmas morning, I think the whole nation was focused. This was the topic on everyone's Christmas dinner tables. And when the signal didn't come back, the magic of Christmas morning, just, for me, seemed to evaporate. And I don't know about you all here, but whether that was your feeling. But nevertheless, you had to, the whole story became a lost pet story, not a scientific mission story, because there was going to be another chance later on that evening when Colin sped off to Jodrell Bank to see if we could get sign of Beagle then. And I'd been working overnight and had to do a package for the Today programme. And I was supposed to go home and sleep, but I was too excited, too concerned to sleep. So I stayed up till, 1 in the morning, awaiting the signal, and then came the bad news that Jodrell Bank hadn't heard. And I sort of knew in my heart that that was it. And today,
and this morning, well, today, there's been a summary of the investigation into why Beagle 2 hasn't communicated. And as I understand, Colin, that one of the possibilities is that the atmospheric density around Mars is perhaps less than was expected.
There are two things that we have identified. Let me say, first of all, I did say we wanted to get a picture, and we've been fortunate enough to have a great deal of effort put in on our behalf by the camera team on the Mars Global Surveyor, the NASA mission. So anybody who believes that there is some kind of animosity between the European Space Agency and NASA couldn't be farther from the truth. The NASA team on both Odyssey and Global Surveyor, which are the two NASA missions in orbit, have done a phenomenal amount for Beagle. First of all, in trying to communicate, Odyssey continues to do this, continues to listen for us. Global Surveyor has been looking for us. So, those are efforts that we have to acknowledge. From our own resources, we have been trawling through everything that we have in terms of data that could possibly help. One thing that we've come up with is that the Mars Express, one of the Mars Express orbiter instruments, has actually measured the density of the atmosphere, and we find that it's rather lower than we had expected at high altitude. All the models that we use for the entry process appeared to have used numbers which, with the best will in the world, were the ones we had when we modelled the entry. It seems that those numbers may be wrong. And in fact, I should say that both the NASA rovers that are down on the surface of Mars now, Spirit and Opportunity, both also found discrepancies in the atmospheric pressure at high altitude as they descended. Both of them found that they were late in various events that were initiated according to the density of the atmosphere. Now, if that was the circumstance during the Beagle descent, then it may be that we never encountered the resistance that we expected, and Beagle's parachutes opened too late, in which case, or didn't open at all, in which case we'd have gone into the surface rather harder than we'd expected. There is one other thing that we've identified, and this is not, this is by no means certain, that we've actually looked very, very hard at the last pictures taken of Beagle as it spun away from the Mars Express spacecraft. And here we have an example of how Beagle has attracted help from all manner of quarters. We had somebody who emailed into us who said he was an expert in image processing. Could he do anything at all with any of the images that we had? And indeed, we found he was very, very much an expert from a military background in image processing. And looking at the images of Beagle leaving Mars Express, he's recognized that there is what appears to be a reflection on the outside of the multi-layer insulation, which may depict that there was something out of order beneath the spacecraft at that point. Now, we don't have any way of saying whether that is true or not, but with some more image processing, it may be we can match that discrepancy up to a part on the spacecraft, which could be that there was something inside which was dislodged. These things are, both of them, I hasten to add, are the atmosphere and the appearance of the outside of the insulation. Both of these things are very, very speculative, and we're working on them. But it's been always a policy of the Beagle project to share with people information, because by sharing the knowledge that we have, we hope that that will encourage interest in science, rather than turn this into a very much, trust us, we're scientists, we'll tell you when we've examined all the possibilities, written it up, had it refereed by 5 referees, and the editor of Nature has said that we can publish it in his journal. We find here that we really, if we want your enthusiasm about the space program, then we're going to have to engage with you.
So on the note of sharing, this is an in conversation with, so we are throwing the floor open to questions. If I could ask you to wait for the microphone to reach you before you ask your question, that would be very helpful. There have also been questions that have come in by email, not just from here but from abroad, and I wanted to kick off, Colin, by asking one that's come in from Karsten Gregers Lund from Denmark. Dear Colin, didn't Beagle 2 have a black box or something like that so that you could get in touch and see whether she's damaged or not?
Well, that was an area that came in for rather a lot of discussion this morning. If you cast your mind back to 1999, there was a NASA mission there called Polar Lander, which went missing in much the same circumstances as Beagle 2. It entered the Martian atmosphere and never called home. At that point in time, NASA decided that it would not do such a thing again. It would put some kind of transmitter on board the next lander that they sent, so that there would never be a circumstances under which they didn't know exactly when a lander disappeared off the face of, I shouldn't say the face of the Earth, off the face of Mars. But important stuff for knowing what to do in the future. Now, of course, there were several reasons why Beagle couldn't do that. We did actually look into this and considered the possibility. It would have cost us mass that we didn't have aboard the Beagle probe.
How much did Beagle weigh?
I think the black box on the Spirit and Opportunity was something like 5 kilograms. If you want 5 kilograms on Beagle, then the only way to do it is to throw the mass spectrometer off. Now, since we were flying to fly the mass spectrometer, it was something that didn't get a great deal of consideration. But there was another reason as to why it wasn't any point in us putting a transmitter on board, is that we didn't have the assets around Mars to communicate with. By assets around Mars, I mean that when Mars Express entered the atmosphere, when Beagle entered the atmosphere, Mars Express, the carrier mission, the parent mission, was doing some complicated maneuvers. It wasn't able to try and communicate with Beagle at that time. The NASA orbiters that were there were positioning themselves ready for the NASA landings, so they also couldn't have communicated with us if we wanted. So we virtually were going into the situation of Mars where if we had a transmitter on board, it would have had to have been a very, very big one so it could transmit to Earth. And that would have not meant just the mass spectrometer going off. It would have probably meant half the parachutes and the gas bags as well. So afraid it wasn't an option. Not an option.
Can I invite questions from the audience? We'll be talking about anything relating to Beagle 2. I mean, we're not just talking about the science here, but I think that we all agree that Beagle 2 has transformed the image of space science in this country, particularly as we seem to have gone in for an era of unmanned exploration, particularly in Europe. So I'd very much like to invite questions from the floor. Please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you as soon as we can. Yes, I think the gentleman... Thanks.
Dangers of disappearing from
I'm sorry, she's about to fall off the edge there.
I'm not surprised. Is it working?
Can everybody hear? Yes.
I'm not surprised that things do go wrong if they travel so many hundreds of thousands of miles. But what I'd like to ask you is, do you propose to carry on the experiment? Are you proposing to continue sending Beagles to Mars? The reason why I ask this is because I've got an American colleague of mine who was invited by NASA to try and develop a concrete with material from the moon, because that was the time when they had proposals to send men to the moon. And now that the Americans are very keen, Bush in particular, is very keen to send men to Mars, he is proposing a similar type of tests. and he asked me to cooperate. This is the reason why I'm asking you.
Well, if I could have my way, obviously we would certainly intend to send a future mission to Mars along the Beagle line. However, there are lots of things that have to be considered here. Remember, Beagle was a hitchhiker. It seized the opportunity that was there because there was a mission going with a sufficient, with a gap in the payload so that we could have a 60-kilogram lander. Now, in a way, that is half the problem that Beagle faced, is that we were a hitchhiker and that the primary mission had to take precedence over whatever Beagle desired to do. And that was one of the reasons why we found ourselves without communication strategy. We found ourselves being kicked off the Mars Express mission 6 days out from Mars, when we would have preferred to have gone farther. So what happened in the later stages of today's parish pump meeting was that having looked at all the various scenarios that could have gone wrong and not being able to identify which one was appropriate, we actually sat down a few days ago, a small group of us went through a scenario mission which would have eliminated many of the risk factors. Some of the things, like I've already alluded to, you want to, if you're going to successfully land on Mars, first of all, you have to have a dedicated mission. So instead of us being a passenger on an orbiter in future, we would want to set out as a dedicated lander mission. If we went with an orbiter, it would be the orbiter would carry us as the primary activity. It might even go into orbit around Mars before it kicked us off, so that we could fly around the planet seeking an opportune time and place to land. For example, looking down to see if there was any adverse conditions in the atmosphere in terms of dust, and which would affect the landing. So there's that sort of part to it. The other things that we could, we would like a beacon to go down with, and we would have our own asset in orbit that we could communicate with, and we would choose the right time to go, such as we could go early in the morning when the conditions in the atmosphere are more favorable. They're more, there's no wind, so it's better for parachutes. We then looked at various parts of the entry, descent, and landing system. And one of the things that we would like to do for the future is I know everybody has been captivated by the bouncing ball, but one of the things that we would like to do away with is the continuous bouncing for perhaps 15 or 20 bounces. And we actually saw some data from one of the NASA missions, which showed that the number of bounces that experience was something more like 50 than 15. Now, if you can do away with all those random events, then you can have a much better chance of landing. So we've been considering what we call deadbeat airbags. These are airbags that are designed to do only one strike. They hit the surface, and the energy of the impact actually is absorbed by the bags, and you don't bounce away. That way you can do a mission whereby you can predict all the parameters of the collision and test them much better on Earth.
But presumably we're talking about big bucks.
No, these are not necessarily big bucks. In fact, deadbeat airbags are rather well tested on Earth because they are used on Earth for a variety of uses, which I won't go into because they're mostly military. But they're designed for throwing things out of planes to land military systems on the surface of the Earth. But there's rather a lot of technology there which we could draw on if we wanted to go down this route. But a predictable one impact is a lot easier to test than a very unpredictable, random orientation of a lander inside a gas-filled bags.
Colin, I think we all admire the fact that you're able to almost do so much with so little resources, but was that not really the problem in the end? There were a lot of people, as you know, that had written off Beagle even before it was launched. And when I spoke to a contact in NASA, he said that a lot of people felt that spending $500 million on sending 2 rovers to Mars was a lot of money, but to spend $65 million on sending a spacecraft on the surface of Mars was a complete waste of money.
That's a point of view. I don't think it was a complete waste of money, because if we hadn't spent, it wasn't 65 million, but if we hadn't spent any of that money, we would still be sort of living in the dark ages with regard to landing on a planetary surface. We wouldn't have 5 years of experience and knowledge of how to do it properly in the future. We would be starting now with a blank sheet of paper, whereas we are starting from a point where we do know what we can do to decrease the risks of landing.
Did you ever seriously contemplate the risk of what looks like failure?
Oh, we contemplated the risks all the time, and we continuously ran...
Because you are a relentless optimist.
Yeah,
we all know that.
Yeah, but we continuously ran over in our minds, and even in computer models, what the percentage chance of landing might be, and trying to...
and what was it?
You wouldn't put a figure on it.
It was very, very difficult to put figures on it. But with hindsight, it's there are a large number of sequential events that take place. Even if all of those were somewhere in the order of 99 or 95% times out of 100 that you would succeed, if you think about them all in sequence and the probability that you calculate from multiplying them all together, you can very easily get down to 70%, and you can get down to lower than that if they all turned out to be 95. Now, every pyrotechnic device that you have to fire is something that may not happen. And if you can't build redundancy into those systems because you don't have enough mass, then they are all going to reduce the probability. So really what we've been doing for any reflight is to eliminate them.
Well, I mean, most of us are here to celebrate your achievements, but there are critics, and if I can play the part of the bad guy for a moment, one of the criticisms of what you did is, I think we all appreciate the great adventure, but what's wrong with playing your part? I mean, space is a corporate business these days. And, we're in a situation where you want to send Beagle up again in 2007, even though there isn't a launch. The European Space Agency says, well, come and take part in the Aurora program. Come and take part in partnership with us.
Now, the Aurora program is going to...
That's Europe's next mission to Mars.
But
you're insistent on getting Beagle back up to Mars. I mean, is it just about ego?
No. There's several questions in there, most of which are rather easy to address. First of all, let's say the one thing that we felt on January 3rd when Spirit landed, when we looked at the pictures of NASA engineers celebrating, we realized just how much it meant to NASA to succeed. And we realized that just how much extra effort they put into getting Spirit onto the surface of Mars. And I will claim, or our team will claim, that we had a part to play in that, they knew that there was somebody else potentially able or capable of exploring Mars apart from just NASA. So lots of people doing the exploration in different ways definitely gets the best out of both of them. They succeeded, we didn't succeed, but they've had their past notable failures. And to come to Aurora, the Aurora program is the European Space Agency's future solar system exploration program. That is something where Europe and and NASA are in fact travelling down relatively similar paths.
NASA has its own
NASA
program.
has a program.
We're looking slightly at competing
At 10
programs.
times the funding. At 10 times the funding, NASA has a program. The Beagle Aurora actually was designed, in fact I took part in the designing of the Aurora program. Aurora was designed believing that Beagle would be a success. Now, we discussed this at some extent this afternoon here, and the Aurora program requires that Europe demonstrates that we can land on Mars in some way before we commit to a much more costly large rover sample return mission. So Beagle would be considered as some part of the Aurora program. Now it was considered to be there for the Aurora program before.
Can I invite some more questions from the floor? This gentleman here. If you wait for the microphone, someone is going to...
Hi, I was...
Sorry, we'll come to you next.
Okay. Hi, I was wondering, there's the Beagle is obviously associated with Mars very closely, but there are now 2 rovers on Mars. Things move on. Are you looking towards perhaps some other planets, such as the icy moons of Jupiter, or moving on beyond Mars?
It's a long way to Europa, and nobody has a spacecraft built to land or planned to land on Europa yet. I think this was another point which was addressed at some length this afternoon, is that what we mustn't do in terms of exploration is to keep reinventing the wheel, jumping around like stamp collectors. We really need to have a program where the heritage provides the basis of the next mission. Instead of trying to, in fact, we could all go back to a blank sheet of paper and start designing say a 60-kilogram probe to land on Mars was a waste of money. We need a 600-kilogram probe. Now, that is a complete redesign. We really do need to go.
So much extra mass.
Well, I'm not saying why we should need it. I'm just saying this is a new way forward. You could just simply say, we need a 600-kilogram, and we start with a blank sheet of paper again. What we really need to do is to look at Beagle and say, we got so close, there must be some huge parts of this which are still are capable of working. What are the few things that we have to fix to sort it out? And I think there are, we can do a bit more testing in a 4-year timescale, and we can eliminate some of the points which are at risk, and as many as we can take out. Even if you look at the numbers of missions that anybody's had to Mars over the 6 years since I suggested to ESA that they should have a lander on their Mars Express mission, at least half of the missions that have taken place since then have gone missing. So there's a 50% chance that you don't land on Mars, irrespective of any of the probabilities you calculate from your own system. So I think I want to go with 2, and the only chance of going with 2 is to build something that we already have the technology mostly developed for.
I think the subtext of this is, I suppose, where scientists think the search for life would be most likely to be answered. I mean, do you believe that Mars is the prime destination for searching for extraterrestrial life?
I think
there have been some comments about the moons of...
Yeah, the events of the last couple of years in terms of demonstrating that Mars was a place where there was a large amount of water, right down to the last week where the Opportunity rover has actually now found sedimentary material on the surface of Mars. We are getting closer and closer and closer to believing that we have a planet whose history has been dictated by the flow of water. Now, I will go right back to what started me off in this quest in the first place, is the study of Martian meteorites. In Martian meteorites, we know we have some rocks that came from Mars. We know that they were altered by water. We know that they have minerals that have been deposited from water. I always have argued about the existence of carbonates, which have so far not been found on Mars in any significant amounts. But I was able to point out this afternoon that the kind of rock that Opportunity was making such an amazing, turning into such an amazing discovery last week, sulfate and sulfate minerals, we found in Martian meteorites in 1985. So the story is there in Martian meteorites. All those things can be proved to have happened on Mars. The one thing that we cannot show did happen on Mars is that the organic matter, which is found in the sedimentary minerals, which if you find it on Earth, is taken to be the evidence of organisms that lived in the water. You just cannot demonstrate that from the Martian meteorites. So the purpose of going to Mars was to, if you like, dot the I and cross the T's of what we'd found with Martian meteorites.
And I know, both I and Palab, just a yes or no answer, if it's possible. Do you think there is life on Mars?
No, I don't answer such questions. I want to...
I tried.
I only ever have said that what we wanted to do was to send what we thought was the best experiment to answer the question. I find it unscientific to try and, answer the questions up front. I like to design experiments that give you as many possible alternate answers as you can get out of them.
But this is opinion, not scientific fact. If you're a betting man and you had to bet one way or the other, which way would it be?
I would believe that we're certainly not alone in the universe, because I think the elements of life are they're 4 of the 5 most abundant elements in the cosmos. I found that, or the work that we've done on terrestrial samples has demonstrated to us that life arose on Earth as soon as Earth was strong enough or rigid enough to support life. So it seemed to me that life is not something that only arose by chance after a very, very long period. It did come about on Earth very, very soon after Earth was formed. And my guess, therefore, is that the chances are it could have happened on Mars too.
Just before we invite more questions, I just want to do a quick audience experiment. Can you raise your hand if you think it more likely than unlikely that there is or was life on Mars?
You better ask for the other.
Are we including us? It doesn't really make a difference. What do we
think?
You
ask for the other show of hands, because I think you're going to get less.
Yeah, I think so. I think some people are hedging their bets. Who thinks that it's more unlikely than likely that there was or is life on Mars? Oh, okay. So a real and
there are a few abstentions.
I think so. So
I'd just be interested in hearing from one of them why they think it's more unlikely. I was wondering if you'd get the microphone to.
Would somebody be able to do that? If somebody who raised their hands for the latter
Why did you
could
come
explain
tonight?
why?
Is it raining? Is it raining heavily outside or something?
Sorry,
I take it you can hear me. Thank you. The reason of my skepticism is born in the fact that, as I understand it, the conditions required for life are so narrow as to be highly unlikely outside of this planetary system.
Colin.
Well, I thought I'd almost just address that in the sense that life did arise on Earth very early in its history, and it was not a very benign place at that time. I think life was an accident waiting to happen, and Mars should have been very similar to Earth, actually earlier in the history of the solar system. So I'm afraid I don't agree with you. I think the...
So cunningly, we found out that Colin did think that life once existed on Mars.
World exclusive. Are there any more questions? I want to take one from... Can we take the gentleman in the 4th row, please?
He's the fifth.
Sorry,
one.
the gentleman in front of you.
Do you feel that the Beagle 2 story will help you with future sponsoring, or the opposite?
Do I want to try and raise the amount of money to buy a rocket, build an orbiter and a lander? Well, that's a big question. One thing that, one difficulty that we had in raising sponsorship is that, and it alludes to something that Palab asked earlier about money, and it's something which we have to address for the future, is that we were always being considered as we wouldn't be ready in time, we wouldn't develop the technology, we wouldn't have a lander. People didn't want to put money in early. They wanted to hang back until it was a cast iron certainty. And that goes whether it was sponsors or governments. Now, we must not do that again. If we are going to go there, in addition to deciding that you want a dedicated mission, you have to decide that you want to do it. And you want to do it now, otherwise you'll certainly never do it in 2007.
To be fair, Colin,
I'm about to answer
the question about whether it's harder or easier.
I'm coming to the question about money. The thing that we had to do, we were always trying to do, was to demonstrate to people that there actually was a value to the exposure that we would get from landing or going to Mars to look for life. Now, we didn't actually ever get to the end of the experiment, and I think that the news coverage associated with looking and finding life, or finding or not finding life, would have been even more enormous than what we got. What we actually showed that was that, just look at a couple of things, that our coverage on the web on Christmas Day was greater than the audience of Only Fools and Horses. Now, that might not be a statistic that you will appreciate, but nevertheless, it's a very, very telling one. And in the period between December the 17th and January the 31st, we had 3,619 identified newspaper reports about Beagle 2. That is a total, in those 5 weeks, we had more newspaper coverage by a factor of 2 than the newspaper coverage that we had had since the inception of the idea of Beagle 2 up until the time we got to the landing, which is 6 years.
When I interviewed you,
you were one
recently,
of those, yes.
No, yeah, not all 3,000, I have to say. But when I interviewed you, I mean, it was the very question that I was interested in because, for example, most scientists would not go to the press or, get members of Blur to endorse what they're doing in a way, or to add their names to it. Most people would go to, the funding councils. And I know that we had a chat about, that perhaps there being a feeling that other academics might also feel that they needed to go to the press and publicise things much more highly in order to win funds. I mean, do you think it makes it harder for both you and other people to get fundings from those sources?
I'd rather get off my backside and do something about it than to just keep on saying, we need more funds. Saying we need more funds and not being prepared to do a Norman Tebbit and get on your bike and go out there and do it. The whole thing about the press, though, about knowing that there was an audience out there, and or you need an audience. If you're going to sell a brand, you need an audience, you need a market. The whole business of knowing there was an audience out there, which was something which I'd built up over 30 years. My career started with the Apollo missions, and I'd seen how much press coverage they attracted. It moved on to the Viking landers, and I was a part of that as a spectator, and I saw how much press coverage that attracted. And then in studying Martian meteorites, we had 3 occasions on which there was actually media madness as we went through the study of the meteorites and said that we had these rocks from Mars and that they contained tantalizing evidence of life on the red planet, I saw just how much coverage they could generate. And so we started off very, very quickly in 1997, realizing that if we were going to have this mission, that we had to create a groundswell and potentially, if necessary, sell the advertising rights. The blur situation arose entirely by accident out of a chance conversation that I had with somebody in a lunch queue, and that it just led on from there. I've never been anybody, if I see an opportunity, I grasp it. I don't let it pass me by, and I would have regretted not trying to enlist Blur just as much as I would have regretted not trying to fly to Mars in 2003 when the planet was closer than it had been for 60,000 years.
But the coverage wasn't about Mars or the traditional things that got you excited through Apollo and the Viking landers. It was about your personal story. And, we're all fascinated by it, with the highs and lows of it.
But that was very much a conscious decision. Yeah. We recognized that, or we were led to believe that what turned people on in space missions was the human aspect, the astronauts. Now, we didn't have an astronaut, but we did have... No, we had it. It was a story about people striving to do a space mission.
Against the odds.
And a robotic space mission can be just as interesting as long as it's the story of the people. And we consciously went out and one of the first things that we did was to talk to a television producer and say, look, we have a story here. And he was actually in my office trying to get me to participate in fact, he's in here tonight. He was trying to get me to participate in some programming that he was trying to run to the BBC, and I said, well, look, we have this other story that I want to do, and he left my office having decided that we had an absolute winner as a television story in Beagle 2. And I think, as I've said, from the coverage we got was...
But this approach, by twisting people's arms through publicity, it's not made you popular, has it?
It's made me very popular with the
public. But not with...
Whether it's made me popular with my peers, I think is a question that you could ask. But there was a meeting held a couple of weeks back by the community who were lobbying the Particle Physics and Astronomy Research Council for UK's involvement in the ESA Aurora program. And if you heard some of my peers in that room, you would have believed that I was the new Messiah, because they, even though we'd failed, they saw the opportunity here that the government would be amenable for putting money into the space program to have a planetary exploration program. So I think there is a minority of my peers who are probably I'm not too popular with, but the people who matter to me, I care very much about, and I think in their eyes they believe I'm a hero, and thank you for that.
But do you care about perhaps the friction that may have arisen with others?
I think it's all good, all done in a good competitive spirit. If it's raised the profile of science in this country, and it's encouraged a few people to take science courses and register for science and chemistry, physics, maths, biology, whatever, in universities, then I think it's achieved something which is something we shouldn't knock. And a few people who may have be unhappy with my methods should swallow their pride.
I want to bring in a question that's come in by email from Robert Riley, doesn't say where from. After watching all the press briefings you gave throughout the mission, I have one overriding question. When are you going to get your own TV show?
Well, anyone watching BBC would think he's already got one.
That's right. You'll sign him up. What do you think about that?
No, I'm quite happy making cameo appearances and other people's TV shows.
Careers.
No alternative careers just yet.
Okay.
I still have some unfinished business on Mars.
Can I open up the floor again to questions? Can we have the gentleman here in the black suit? Thank you.
Given all the visitors to your website on Christmas Day and all the media coverage which you've got in the later stages of the mission, have you considered using some form of charity, perhaps the Royal Society, I'm not sure, to gather funds in from all of those people by regular contribution? There's a lot of support out there, I guess.
Did I speak to you outside? Or no, this is actually... on top of all the coverage on the website, on top of all the media hits, we also have had an enormous number of letters and emails from people who have said very much that. How do we contribute? Can I send you £5? My child wants to send you her pocket money. We've had people who
Which
said...
you haven't taken.
no, it's terribly difficult, however. We had one man who wanted to send us his dole check because he felt that it was worthwhile. We have no mechanism for doing that. You would need, hundreds of thousands of donations. The thing that comes to my mind, however, there is a mechanism. It's called the National Lottery. If I could persuade somebody to take on board funding a science program for Beagle through the lottery. I have tried this out on a number of people in the bar of various pubs where I've been accosted by the public and said, would you feel as though this was something that your lottery ticket could go towards? And invariably they say, yeah, we think this is something and a way in which we'd like to contribute. So I'll explore that a little more.
How do you think that would go down, Halab?
Well, I was wondering
Lottery funding.
if we could, the other way of doing it is if everyone in this room joined a syndicate, and if anyone won, the money would go to Colin.
I think collecting it might be hard.
Nice idea.
Can we have some more questions? Perhaps from the back. So we've not had one from the gentleman, well, in fact, the only gentleman at the back with his hand up. Thank you.
Thanks. The gentleman at the front mentioned President Bush's mission to Mars, putting an astronaut on Mars. Do you think there's a possibility for that to be an international mission, perhaps with the European Space Agency and with China? And how important do you think that would be?
I think the only possibility is it would be an international endeavour. I think I wouldn't want to turn that into a race if I could possibly avoid it. I think, however, I don't foresee a reason other than it being a human desire to do it. At the moment, I think we can explore the solar system without putting people there. And I think, in fact, that there are very good reasons why we shouldn't put people there until we've answered questions about whether there is or was life on Mars. Because the minute we put people into this program, then if we will be taking microorganisms to another planet, and we could be affecting a very delicate ecosystem if there was life there already.
Do you think that the planned manned missions to Mars are essentially a waste of money?
I couldn't say that because without the robotic missions that are precursors to putting men on another planet or ladies on another planet, in fact, lady astronauts ladies are much more suitable to being astronauts, I should say. They're lighter and they don't have some of the physiological problems either. But
we know.
or psychological ones, for that matter.
But you haven't answered my question.
I'm saying there are an awful lot of missions that have to be done, and if we've managed to, in trying to get Aurora into ESA, we've managed to go down use the argument that we are going to try and develop the technology and ask the questions about the missions, so that if it became necessary to answer real scientific questions to put a man on Mars to have to do it, then we would have the capability of doing it. And I don't consider that a waste of money, because there's such a lot of technology which will be developed for use on Earth, and a lot of motivation to people to do science to do it. So
is that a no?
It's money which is going to be spent on Earth, not on Mars.
The thing is, it costs no money whatsoever to promise to send an astronaut to Mars.
That's absolutely true, but it might win a field or two.
But, I mean, do you think that we will ever get back the human exploration of space? I mean, to coin a phrase, we do not do these things because they are too hard.
I don't think we will ever see anything quite like Apollo again. So I think potentially there will be missions involving people, but it might very well turn out that this is an international endeavor designed to bring people closer together, as opposed to a competition of demonstrating military might.
But building a climbing frame in space is hardly the same adventure as going to Mars. It doesn't raise the human spirit in the same way.
That's what I mean. Going to Mars is as a goal that you can set up, is saying this is something which human race could aspire to.
In the Mori poll that I cited earlier, there seemed to be a great public concern about why America should want to send men and women back into space. There was a great suspicion that this was all to do with the militarization of space. I mean, do you think that the motives are entirely scientific?
I really don't know the answer to that question. I was quite surprised. I think you're talking really about the Demos report, and I was quite surprised to see quite so much. I was surprised to see quite so much in that report, which reflected that America was trying to go to Mars for military purpose. I certainly, talking to all the scientists that I know were involved in this program, they're not telling me that it's anything to do with military prowess at all. And even the politicians I talked to in Europe and in Britain certainly don't see this as a means or a mechanism to demonstrate military power.
Can we have some more questions, please? The gentleman in the aisle in the grey suit, please.
Thinking about the future, I take it 2007 is the next window of opportunity to go to Mars, is that right? Is there a 2007 mission planned? Does one exist now? And if one doesn't, when does it have to exist by? When's the starting date? When's the starting line after which it will be too late? And also, why don't you think really ambitiously, not only go for a lander, but also a returner? Go on!
That's called running before you can walk.
Well, are you going to run at least?
The only mission which is on the books at the moment for 2007 is a NASA mission, which is a reflight of some of the hardware which is available from the 2001 lander mission, which was cancelled. That hardware is already, the experiments that will be carried on that are already decided. From our knowledge of how long it took to build Beagle and how long it would take to assemble the vehicle which would have to take us from Earth to Mars, we can afford to carry out preliminary studies for the rest of 2004. We would then have to go into detailed testing at the end of 2004. with a view to beginning to build the mission at the end of 2005. Now, that's a theoretical timescale. There is a small snag in that theoretical timescale. If you want to carry it through, then you have to have somebody almost now who says, we'll start to give you some budget to do the preliminary studies. We need to investigate, the things that we need to test. And unless somebody gives us some money over the next few months, weeks, then you start believing that 2007 is an opportunity that it vanishes. Remember, we have a very, very competitive science package that we built and tested, that we actually have flown to Mars. In fact, it's on Mars someplace. Quite not, I know not where, but we could build the science package. We need a bit more testing in the system that gets us to the surface, and we need to eliminate the risks, as I've said. But if we could get a bit of seed corn money now, we could do a lot this year to come up with a very good mission for 2007.
But as I was saying, Colin, you've...
Sorry, the gentleman wanted to come back.
The amount of money that you're talking about, is it £200 million?
What, for a full mission?
Yeah.
No, the number being bandied about this afternoon was 100 million euros. I wouldn't want to comment really on that, but remember that we have a lot of the technology already and a lot of the testing in terms of the vehicle to carry us to Mars.
And roughly what would that figure cover? Are we talking about one replacement
lander? I think you could probably make 2 landers for much the same price as making 1.
To be launched at the same time?
Yeah, on the same carrier.
Okay.
But one of the things that was also being said today was the head of the Aurora program, Franco Ongaro, was saying, yeah, we love the technology, put it in with ExoMars, which is going to be the next European Mars rover, and we'll incorporate it, but you still want 2000, which is going to be 2009, but you still want 2007, so that the British Beagle sets its flag on Mars.
No, that's not the reason at all. Franco was saying incorporate the instrumentation into the rover. That the technology to land on Mars still doesn't exist. And if you think sending a £50 million mission that didn't succeed, then think about the repercussions of sending a €1 billion mission, i.e. ExoMars rover, without some kind of knowledge that you do have some way of getting down to the surface of Mars.
So you would be suggesting this is a precursor
The
to
Beagle, a reflight of Beagle in 2007 would be an absolutely essential component of the ExoMars program and the Aurora program. I told you ExoMars and Aurora was drawn up with in the belief that Beagle would have succeeded already and that we would know something about landing on Mars. Would you want to do, if this atmospheric density is in fact a problem, would you want to risk a £1 billion mission?
Well, we've got the experience of Spirit and Opportunity to draw from, even though we've not got the experience of Beagle. Well, we have got the experience of Beagle, but
I assure you that technology is not there for us to just simply pluck out of the air. In Europe, most of that technology is covered under American so-called ITAR regulations. They're military regulations that don't allow that technology to be exported.
So you can't access it.
We couldn't access it.
You have to start from
We
scratch.
couldn't access it for the airbags that we had built in America for Beagle.
And as I understand it, it's every couple of years is the launch window. So if not 2007, then 2009.
It's 2009.
And then 2000.
But there are already 2 very, very big missions already planned. We are not going to displace ExoMars from the Aurora program. And NASA has a very large rover mission planned for that.
You're making a pretty good go of it by saying you're going to waste your money if you don't.
No, I'm saying I would like to see Europe having a rover mission that flew alongside the NASA mission, which is going on the same timescale. And if Europe is going to do that, then it definitely has to demonstrate a capability in 2007. And I'll say it again, I think it is much, much better for there to be two groups of people playing off each other's successes in order to ensure that there are successes. I think in the past we've seen that when NASA felt it was the only player in town, it had some well-publicized failures, and I think people are not on their, do not do of their best when they are continuously playing against themselves. It gets absolutely boring trying to knock the same ball into the same golf hole if you're on your own.
Can I quickly ask, I mean, this relates into what we've been talking about. Just had an email in from an M. Dixon who asks, what do you intend to accomplish with a new mission that the American rovers have not done or could not do? I
think we intend to accomplish rather a lot. One of the most frustrating things I found about the NASA missions at the moment is that the science program is a search for water. I've already said that the Beagle program was a search for life, past and present. Nobody is examining the atmosphere on Mars, which is actually a search for current life. When you look for trace constituents in the atmosphere, you're actually looking for the waste products of metabolic reactions. So you could be answering the question, is there life currently on Mars? Nobody is doing that. Only Beagle was going to do it. Only Beagle was going to look for the relict organic matter which accompanied sedimentary minerals. Neither of those NASA rovers are doing that. Now, they may be capable of doing it in 2009, which is all a very good reason as to why we should try and do it in 2007.
You're in touch, I suppose, with the kind of the public attitude to this. Do you think there is the appetite, the public appetite, for another go at Beagle after what seems like a heroic failure?
Well, I mean, I think that was a problem with the Mori poll that Demos commissioned. If you ask people, would you like to have another trip to Mars? Sure, why not? But I think the real argument that I sense it's going on is that all the money for this sort of thing is ring-fenced, and so poor Richard Halliday, who's the head of the Particle Physics and Astronomy Research Council, has got to say, well, either I give Colin some more money to act as seed corn to do the next Beagle, or I can't pay the next subs to CERN. I mean, that's the way he's framing the argument. It might be a false way of doing it, but at the moment, the only way of getting new money in is for Colin to generate all this publicity, get wider appeal, get commercial sponsorship. And there doesn't seem to be the capacity, either in the UK or even in the European Union, to kind of do that Kennedy moment. To kind of say,
do you think it was a moment that passed?
For Beagle again? Well, no. I don't think it's passed. But I think the problems are far more fundamental. It's to do with the structures of the European Union and the things that get funded and things that don't get funded. If you can get 3 partners, meeting sort of 5 European priorities, blah, 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 then you've got to play I mean, you're a master of the Euro game, and even you're having difficulty.
I'm not a master of the Euro game. I had to fight very hard to get this into an ESA mission.
And I suppose this taps into also a wider debate about funding space science and particularly manned exploration at all. Because we've had another email question from Adrian Carlos. And this is to you, Colin. What would you say to doubters who criticise spending on space exploration, citing more worthy causes here on Earth, such as deep-sea exploration, but third-world investment, things like that? Starvation. People are starving. Why are we spending millions and billions on sending things and people into space?
I don't think we send actually that much at all. There was an interesting number that was presented to us in the Aurora Parish Pump meeting the other week. It was the company Astrium came up with, and of course Astrium was one of my biggest supporters, they worked out that in fact the total sum of money spent on space exploration in UK is in fact a factor of 3 less than the amount of money you spend on products to keep your hair clean. Now, if you want me to give you my space budget, then by all means, will you mind stop washing your hair to give that to all these good social causes as well? And I assure you, you won't stop washing your hair, so therefore I don't think I should give you my space budget back.
So you don't go along with the argument?
I don't go along with that argument at all.
Schools, hospitals could do with the money.
I don't know, I haven't got any problems about schools and hospitals. I'm just saying don't say the space program is the place where the money for schools and hospitals should come from.
But how do you change things? Because it's a familiar refrain that Britain spends less than Belgium, and why should we single the Belgians out for special treatment? I don't know. But we don't spend enough on space exploration. And there are structural reasons why we don't. I mean, how do we break out of this cycle?
Well, the thing that we were really trying to do is show that there was an appetite for space research in UK, and I guess we were endeavouring to show that if we did that, then it would be an appetite which would be across the board. It wouldn't be just the Apollo generation, which I come from. It would be that we would actually create a Beagle generation. Now, there is a great need for us to encourage young people back into the sciences. These subjects are, in fact, we have to have people who are scientists because they underpin the economy. And at the end of the day, that means if we have a vibrant economy, we all make more money, there becomes more money available for space research and indeed for building hospitals and schools. It's a cyclic argument. It goes around and we all get better off in the long run. Then we could spend more money on third world problems as well.
We've got a few minutes left, and I just wanted to ask, if people have got burning questions, this is your moment to ask them.
That gentleman over there has tried so many times.
I think we have to give
He's not related to me, by the way.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, if we take it as an assumption we are going again with Beagle 2, and obviously good luck on that. You've mentioned sending 2 Beagles up there, having your own orbiting asset to support it. What other strategic changes would you look to at this time to make the mission more successful?
I wouldn't come forward with your good wishes too soon. You know, this is the stone is back at the bottom of the hill. The hill is steeper, and I'm older, and the rest of the team are as tired as I am. But we do intend to give it our best shot to get it back up to the top of the hill. The strategic the things are to remove the things that are we see as the highest risks, and to remove as many as the risks as we can. For example, the sort of thing we were talking about this afternoon is that I'm sure you've all seen the video of Beagle landing upside down, it turning the right way up, the clamp band blowing off, the lid folding open, and then 4 solar arrays folding out. And then you come to the point where the antenna is actually exposed to be able to communicate. When we were designing our replacement Beagle, we simply said that there are too many sequential failures here. The sensible thing would have been to put the antenna on the outside so that we could have communicated straight away and then got signals in to do the various other operations. Now, if you don't have to fold out, if you don't have to have a lid that opens, and you don't have to have a solar arrays that fold out, you can do away with pyrotechnic charges that do these sorts of things. And when you get down a completely different strategy, you can see that with the same basic technology, you can eliminate an awful lot of things that could go wrong.
I know we had some questions down here, and there was a woman that wanted to ask a question there in the aisle. Please. Thank you.
I wanted to know what the most significant personal lesson is that you've taken out of the exercise so far.
The most,
if any.
Yeah. I think, I'll say it again, never wait or hesitate getting kid before it's too late. You just have to take the opportunities that present themselves. I had decided that my wife and I had decided that we were going to try and put a lander on Mars as part of the Mars Express mission within 20 minutes of coming out of an ESA meeting that told us that this was impossible because there was no money and no technology, but the opportunity was there. And, you know, I really, again, I've said this hundreds of times as well, is that I was only the Pied Piper in all of this. When I said to the UK community, the UK space community, how do you fancy joining me in an effort to try and design a mission to Mars, and I'm working on it? They all followed. You know, it was almost as though I played the tune and they all pranced along behind me, irrespective of where it might lead. And they're still prepared, I assure you, they're still prepared to follow because they still see this as unfinished business. It's a very, very challenging thing to do and well worth all the effort.
What's been the single most memorable moment for you in all the 7 years or so that you've been gestating
No, I
this?
refuse to answer this question on the grounds the single most memorable moment is yet to come.
I think that's a suitable place to wrap up. Can I thank the panellists, Pallav Ghosh from the BBC, and of course the man who needed no introduction and needs no exit.
Okay, thank you.
Colin Pillinger.
Well, I'm sure you'll agree with me that we've had an outstandingly interesting and informative evening, and I think it just remains for me to thank Anjana for being an excellent chairperson on this event. She's kept the discussion going. She's brought a lot of you in. She's read out the beautiful emails and made the whole event very worthwhile. So would you join with me in thanking Anjana for being an excellent chair? Thank you.